Hey, if you grew up in the 2010s, especially in the world of rap, you probably remember the rise of drill music coming out of Chicago. Names like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, and Fredo Santana took the world by storm, shedding light on the harsh realities of life in Chicago and gang-affected neighborhoods. It's like when NWA hit the scene, before straight outta Compton. Not many people know what was really going on there. By the early 2010s, the Chicago drill scene was in full swing, and the city's violence was an epidemic, having more deaths than the Iraq War. And in 2015, Spike Lee decided to step in to tackle this issue with his film Chi-Raq. Now, Spike Lee, you know him. He's no stranger to tackling tough social issues. Think Do the Right Thing and think Malcolm X. The guy made a career out of addressing race and injustice and equality in America. Now, when he decided to make a film about gang violence in Chicago, a city that has a huge death toll rivaling a war zone, you expected something heavy, something provoking, right? But instead of a grounded, well thought out film, we got this.
Self-control and total abstinence from knocking the boots.
Something that felt like a bit of a mess. Let's break it down, shall we? Was Chi-Raq the serious film we needed, or did Spike Lee make a mockery out of the real issue? Stick around and let's dive into it. Let's start off with the plot. In Chi-Raq, we're introduced to two rival gangs in Chicago. The Spartans, led by Chi-Raq, the gangster of the film, and the Trojans, led by Cyclops. Chi-Raq is played by none other than Nick Cannon, the rapper, the gang leader, and Cyclops is played by Wesley Snipes, head of the rival gang. These two gangs are at war, and the violence is wreaking havoc on the city. The plot really kicks in when a young girl, Patty, gets killed in a drive-by shooting, which this tragedy sparks a chain of events that leads to Alyssa Strada, played by, I'm not even going to pronounce that name, calling for a strike among the women in the city. The idea is that the women will withhold sex from their men unless the gang violence stops. Yeah, you heard that right. A sex strike to stop gang violence. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Nick Cannon. Yeah, Nick Cannon. The guy who's been a punchline of countless rap jokes. The guy who's more famous for making wild TV show appearances than anything serious. And yet, here he is playing a hardcore gangster in one of the most high-profile films about Chicago gang violence. It's an odd choice, right? When you think about the heavy weight of the subject, gang violence, death, kids getting shot, you really didn't have to ask, is Nick Cannon the guy who should be the center of this? Let's talk about the jarring aspects of Chi-Raq, the tone. The movie's supposed to be addressing real violence, real depth, but Spike Lee decides to handle it satirically. I mean, satire can work when done right. Think Dr. Strangelove, right? But in Chi-Raq, the satire feels out of place. It feels like the film is trying to be funny when the subject matter demands seriousness. The rhyming dialogue, yeah, that's another part of the film that's hard to swallow. Characters literally speak in rhymes, like they're in some kind of musical. One of the most bizarre moments comes right after a child is murdered in a drive-by. This moment, which is supposed to be heavy, tragic, and gut-wrenching. And then the scene is followed by characters just rhyming. It's like, what is going on here? Are we supposed to be laughing, crying? The timing is just off, really. The decision to make everything feel like a musical number just totally undermines the gravity of the situation. The worst part, it feels like the film is in on the joke. It's one thing to use a satire to make a serious point, but here it just feels like the film is making a mockery of the violence it's trying to address. I mean, how can we take it seriously when the dialogue is coming at you in some kind of Broadway musical number? It's like the movie saying, hey, we're addressing gun violence, but hey, let's have some fun musical numbers to keep things light. Now let's talk about what's missing from Chi-Raq and actual social commentary. The film never really gets to the heart of why Chicago's violence is so rampant. Sure, it mentions the killings, but it never delves into the systematic issues that protrude to the violence. Things like poverty, unemployment, historical segregation. Instead, it's more interested in the setting of a strange plot around the sex strike. If Spike Lee had chosen to focus on the root cause of the violence, then the systematic issues that led to it would have been better in the film Chi-Raq. Chi-Raq could have been way meaningful and a powerful conversation starter, but instead we're stuck with this convoluted plot where women stop having sex with their men to stop them from killing each other. While it's an interesting premise on paper, maybe, it feels like more of a gimmick than a legitimate attempt to address a real issue. The film does touch on the media's role in sensualizing violence, but it doesn't really go far enough. It doesn't offer real solutions or insight into what's being done to change things. Instead, it just feels like it's using Chicago gun violence as a backdrop for comedy, making it impossible to take the film's message seriously. One of the most confusing aspects of Chi-Raq is its total inconsistencies. One minute you're watching a serious, dramatic depiction of a child death, and the next moment the characters are breaking into song, delivering their lines in rhymes or engaging in slapstick comedy. This is total whiplash, making it difficult to emotionally connect with the story. And visually, Spike Lee's signature bold colors and artistic choices are all in this film. But in Chi-Raq, these films have a stylistic element. It's supposed to have like an artsy feel, but with the weird plot doesn't help it. So let's talk about the ending. In the final moments, Chi-Raq confesses to his role in the death of the child, and the gangs come together to lay down their weapons, and this is supposed to be a moment of peace, but it feels super rushed. There's no real explanation as to why the characters suddenly change minds about violence, it just happens. It's a classic case of trying to wrap up a complex issue with a simple solution. The movie's trying to say, hey, if we all talk it out, we could solve this. But it feels super forced and unearned. So in the end, what do we make of Chi-Raq? Is this a film that successfully tackles the issues of gang violence in Chicago, or does it completely miss the mark completely? The truth is, Spike Lee had a powerful opportunity here. He could have made a thought-provoking, impactful film about Chicago gun violence and the systematic issues behind it. But instead, we got something that was strange, satirical, and a musical that treats a serious issue like it's a joke. While the film has good intentions, its inconsistencies and bizarre casting choices makes it very jarring.